What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC. Today we're checking out the QSP Canary Glyde lock. This is another one on loan to me from the Apex Pass Around group, so huge shout out to them for allowing me to take a look at it. And the timing of the arrival on this one was very serendipitous. Just last week in a video we were talking about best all-around knives under $50, and I think this one can insert itself into the conversation as well, with the one caveat that the price point on this is actually $52, and so just barely exceeds that $50 threshold. I'll make sure to leave a link to where you can find this down in the description of the video if you're interested in checking it out. But you know, most people who can afford a $50 knife can probably afford a $52 knife. It's only a $2 difference, and in my book that kind of counts as close enough, so we're going to count it here. Now, one area where the Canary really differentiates itself from other knives trying to be best all-around knives under $50 is the sizing. It's actually a little bit smaller than most of those knives, and most of those knives target the 7-inch range. Some are exactly 7 inches or just a shade under 6.95 inches. The reason for that is they're trying to stay with a sub 3-inch blade to stay legal in all 50 states, but because of that you end up with a lot of knives competing in the same space around the same sizing, and so there's definitely people out there that are limited on space or maybe have smaller hands and don't mind a smaller knife, that this is going to appeal to a little bit more so even than some of those other options. This one comes in at 6.58 inches in overall length, and so about ½ inch shorter than the rest. That does mean that they have room if they wanted to increase the sizing on this by about 5% to still stay under that 7-inch mark and really kind of feel pretty similar to what you have now, but that actually might make a pretty big difference for larger hands, as we'll see when we get into this handle. So 3.74 inches on the handle. We have G10 scales here. This one is in the Tiffany Blue, which I'm a huge fan of. Anytime knife companies reach outside of that crown box that has like 6 colors on it for any other color that you don't typically see, I'm a huge fan of that. Now obviously we see blue all the time, but not necessarily this shade of blue, so absolutely loving that. They offer both coated and non-coated blades as well. This one obviously has a coated blade. Not 100% sure what the coating is in this case. I don't know that they actually list that. And so G10 scales and 3.74 inches on there. For me, that's kind of a 3.5 finger grip. That pinky's half on, half off. If I really try to squeeze it, I can get my pinky fully on there where I have all 4 fingers, but for me, this isn't a natural grip. This is a cramped grip. When I grab onto it naturally, I'm a little bit more spread out, and my pinky ends up half on, half off. Now, that's not the end of the world. Still very comfortable for being half on, half off, and still a very secure grip. One thing that I actually really like about these scales is the skeletonization of the handle, and so usually you have that on the liner. When we have it on the scales themselves, visually I'm not a fan of it, but it has a couple cool effects that do actually help the function of the knife itself. The first being that it's shaving ounces, and so this comes in at only 2.72 ounces. Ultra lightweight, which is a big selling point for me. I love carrying knives that are 2.5 to 3 ounces in the summer because I'm wearing a lot of gym style shorts and pants and stuff like that with elastic waistbands. You don't want to be weighed down too much, and so this actually shaves off a decent bit of weight, keeping it ultra lightweight. The other benefit though is, again, with that kind of half on, half off grip with my pinky, 2 of the pads of my fingers end up landing on those speed holes or those skeletonizations, and so it offers a really secure grip where I'm not sliding forward or backwards, don't have to worry about it, and there's no jimping or anything of the sort on the knife, and so you get this really ultra secure grip even though your pinky's not really on there, which leads to actually really comfortable ergos if you're using this for a little bit heavier duty. You know, most of the time a knife this size, you're going to be carrying it for EDC duties, stuff around the office, opening packages, breaking down boxes, light duty stuff, but it's very comfortable for that even though I can't get a full 4-finger grip on it. Now I say can't get a 4-finger grip, I know I said I could squeeze onto there. We also have this flat underneath the pivot that does make a decent landing spot for your index finger, but for me it's just a little bit narrow where it's not ultra comfortable, and even right behind it, even though I'm slightly behind the pivot, it still feels ultra balanced. That is one reason I really like to be in line with the pivot with most of my grips for knives, is that I think it offers a more balanced grip, but in this case it still feels ultra balanced right behind there. I have no issues with it. It's very comfortable, so did a great job on the ergos for such a small knife. But again, if you have even bigger hands than me, your pinky may be completely off there, which is where that lanyard hole comes into play. You can add a lanyard on there so you have something for your pinky to grab on to give you that more secure grip without extending the handles. Now, as far as our blade, we get a 2.84 inch drop point style blade, and so another area where if they wanted to scale it up a little bit to get just under that 3-inch threshold, they could. Honestly, don't think it's necessary here if you're going to be adding length. I think it makes more sense in the handle. Obviously, you would probably do both, but with the blade, 2.84 inches is plenty for the types of tasks you're going to be doing with this knife again, which is again light duty EDC type stuff. We get a full flat grind on here, really nice. 14C 28N on the steel, so great steel at the price point. Our thumb stud tucked nicely outside of those grind lines, so you're not going to be getting caught up on it. Nice little sharpening tool there. More traditional kind of drop point styling to this one than the one we were looking at last week, but really great blade on here. No complaints whatsoever on there. Now, in terms of the deployment, the lockup, we have their Glide lock, which is their version of a crossbar style lock. And one thing I think QSP's been doing especially well is their implementation of this Glide lock. I've had 3 recently that I've checked out. One I owned, one I had on loan, and the action on them is all identical, telling you that they're making kind of a choice to target that type of action. And so it's very kind of purposeful that they're going for this harder spring tension in the crossbar style lock. And what that ends up doing is creating this sort of false detent. So obviously crossbar style locks don't have detents, but it has the feel of a heavier detent knife that does have an actual detent, meaning that you have to apply a little bit more force here, but when you do, it comes flying out. Super snappy, super satisfying action. You don't have any of that mush or slop that can sometimes be associated with crossbar style locks. And again, that's 3 knives in a row that have identical action, so you know it's a very purposeful choice that they're making to implement it in that way. And so definitely a big fan of how QSP is doing their Glide locks. And it's a pretty delicate balance because it can get too heavy where the spring tension is a little bit too heavy. In fact, I just had that on a Gonzo where the spring tension was a little bit too heavy, where it was almost hard to disengage the lock, but also it was very hard to get the action to where I wanted it, where it would just kind of pop out there. The tension was a little bit too heavy where it made it a little bit difficult. And so in this case, they found that kind of perfect middle ground where great action, but also has that heavier feel to it. And so big fan of how they do their crossbar locks, like I said, or the Glide lock is what you'd search for if you're looking for other models with this lock. And it is on bearing, so again, ultra smooth right out of the box, no break-in period or anything like that. Just had great action, exactly how I like it personally out of the box. Now, already mentioned the weight, 2.72 ounces, so this is going to be ultra lightweight, which I think makes this a great all-around kind of summer knife, and so perfect in that regard, or again, if you're just limited on space or prefer those smaller knives. Now, in terms of our pocket clip, we get the kind of standard issue pocket clip that you see on a lot of these budget knives. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. They work well, ultra deep carry. It is reversible, and they do send it with that insert or plug to fill the gap that's left with the reverse slot, and so nice that it's reversible and that you get the plug. That's not always the case on knives in this price range, and QSP does seem to kind of put a concerted effort into including those inserts or plugs, even if it ends up adding $1 or $2 to the cost at the end of the day. Now, one thing about them, the screws are not recessed, so you do kind of catch up on those at the end, but they're pretty close to it. They have a nice kind of shape that rounds off, and so you're able to slide right over, and there's enough real estate in there where it's not causing issues where it's just going to either get caught there completely or destroy your jeans. It seems to not really be an issue, but did think worth pointing out. And again, we have the nice placement on that lanyard hole if you are someone who wants to integrate a lanyard into your knife. And so overall, a huge fan of this. Like I said, I think it's a great alternative if you're looking for an all-around knife that's just a little bit smaller than the rest of the competition. I think that area of the market's much more saturated because they want to get as close to that 3 inches, give you more usable edge. But really, what's the difference between a 2.84 inch cutting edge and a 2.95 inch cutting edge? It's not going to be super noticeable difference. You're going to be able to do all of the same stuff with this knife as you are with those larger alternatives. Would love to hear your thoughts on this one though down in the comments below. Again, I'll make sure to leave a link in the description of the video if you're interested in checking this one out. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, or checking out some of my other videos. All help the channel out a ton, and I hope you have a great one. Take care.